Heartstopper is ending, and I genuinely can't believe that we're finally here. I'm filming this before the final graphic novel, which is titled Heartstopper Volume 6, and at the moment, the release date for Volume 6 is July 2nd, 2026. And we won't have to wait long to see the adaptation because Netflix is wrapping up the show not with a fourth season, but with a movie called Heartstopper Forever, and that is releasing 2 weeks later on July 17th, 2026. I figured I'd recap the whole story from the beginning. Let me be your visual narrator and walk you through their story so you're caught up or get the refresher you need before the last volume and the movie come out. This is going to be the recap for Volume 1. Chapter 1 is titled Wilt. So let me set the scene for you. Just imagine it's January in England when we're first introduced to our main character, whose name is Charlie Sprague. When we first meet Charlie at Truman Grammar School for Boys, he's in the library kissing a boy we later find out to be named Ben. And right away, the vibes are not great between the two of them. They clearly do this pretty often, but Charlie doesn't seem really excited about it. It felt like to me he was saying yes because it's easier than to deal with Ben's reactions if he says no. And I got really bad energy and vibes from Ben the first time I read this. But after their encounter, Charlie is going off to his new vertical form, which as an American, from what I understand, a vertical form is like a study group or registration group where students from different years all sit together for attendance purposes, but I could be wrong. Charlie's teacher's name is Mr. Lang, and he has him sit next to a boy named Nicholas Nelson. And we find out that Nick is a year 11 and Charlie is a year 10 at this school. And I just loved that the first thing that they said to each other was literally just hi. That was it. But Charlie, though, interprets that hi and gets immediately in his head. He assumes that Nick is probably like the boys who we find out had bullied him last year. And I honestly understood why Charlie would think that, because at this school, Nick plays rugby and Charlie hasn't had a lot of really good interactions with boys at the school in general. For a while there, all they really said to each other was hi. But one day, a blue fountain pen exploded all over Nick, and they suddenly had something to talk about other than hi. And as they're going to go get Nick all cleaned up in the bathroom, they started laughing, and that laughter turned into more chatter, and they pretty much lost track of time getting him all cleaned up. And that little moment just cemented them as being friends, which I thought was so cute. Charlie, because he's distracted by Nick, ignores Ben's texts. Ben immediately responded in a way that made it very clear that he does not care about Charlie, and he only really cared about having access to Charlie. And for me, the red flags with Ben just kept waving. We later find out that Ben has a girlfriend, and that girlfriend of his, he is very comfortable being seen with in public, unlike Charlie. And so seeing that whole situation, Charlie just finally has the courage to tell Ben that he doesn't want to meet up anymore. And I bet you can guess how Ben takes that. And if you can't, he doesn't take it well. Thankfully, Charlie does have a friend named Tao who can see exactly what's going on. Tao immediately knows what's going on with Charlie and Nick. He clocks that Charlie has a crush on Nick before Charlie was even really ready to admit it himself. Nick, like I said earlier, is a rugby player at Truman, so Charlie convinces himself that Nick is straight, and he absolutely is not falling for the first boy who's been nice to him outside of his immediate friend group. Ben, meanwhile, is not taking no for an answer. He gets really physical with Charlie, and thankfully, Nick appeared, which made Ben scurry away. Charlie, though, is not ready to explain to Nick what's going on, and he tries to explain it away by saying that he helps Ben with his math homework. And obviously, that is not the full story, but Nick doesn't really push him on the subject right then. So earlier in the day, Nick noticed that Charlie is a really fast runner, and that caught his attention. That's kind of why I think that he was in the hallway looking for Charlie. But at this point, it's obvious that they both want excuses to spend more time together. So Nick asks Charlie if he wants to try out for the rugby team. And Charlie does say he'll think about it, and we find out that he plays drums. He's going off to his drum lessons. And after some thought, Charlie decides to try rugby and try out for the team. And the boys on the team are super confused because they don't really see Charlie as the rugby player type. But thankfully, Nick and Coach Singh advocate for him, and rightfully so, though, because Charlie does make the team, which is super exciting. And by this point, I was really awed by how much diversity and variety. They look real instead of everyone just looking like slightly different variations of the same person. It was really refreshing to see. Rugby gives Charlie and Nick another place to spend time together, and their relationship really starts to grow even more from that atmosphere. Nick even starts to say, "I like you." And of course, Charlie's brain immediately grabs onto that, and he has that "I like you" on replay in his head. So the joy that Charlie has does not last long because, of course, Ben reappears one day after practice, and Charlie meets up with him. And this is where we really find out what's going on between the two of them. Charlie is out as gay, but Ben has been using him in secret while publicly dating a girl. Charlie knows that Ben could swap him out with any other boy willing to kiss him in private, and Charlie doesn't want to be that boy anymore. But instead of listening to what Charlie had to say, Ben decides that the right answer is to forcibly kiss Charlie, and even continues to do so even after he tells him to stop. Thankfully, Nick knew something was off when they ended practice, so he followed him and he saw what happened. He didn't get the full conversation, but he did pull Ben off Charlie and told him off. And that moment is what really changed things between the two of them. This is where Charlie really starts to see that Nick really values their friendship, and they continue to get closer after that. If it wasn't really clear to you, it's very clear that Nick is also feeling something for Charlie, and he thinks about Charlie's smile, and that's how we end chapter 1. Chapter 2 is titled Crush. After everything with Ben that night, Nick messages Charlie, and that's where he is able to get the full story about what happened the previous year. Nick is super supportive of what's going on with Charlie, and he promises him that if Ben ever tries anything like that again, that he would protect him. And by the time the springtime rolls around, Charlie is no longer pretending he doesn't have a crush on Nick. They're texting, they're eating lunch together, and just being generally flirty in ways that the people closest to them can see. And Charlie knows that this crush might hurt him, but he still thinks that Nick is straight. So unfortunately, he can't really stop his own feelings. But Nick invites Charlie over to meet his dog, Nellie. And obviously, as a dog person, Charlie says yes. They don't have a dog because his mom is allergic. We find out that they only live a 10-minute walk away from each other. So it's really easy for them to start spending more time together. He was not ready for that snow. Their crushes are getting so much stronger, and it's becoming more noticeable to the people around them. And I really appreciate that both boys have someone that they can talk to without being judged. From here, though, Charlie and Nick keep finding little excuses to touch each other, joke around, and spend more time together. It's sweet, though, without it really feeling forced. And this is where we also get to see more of Charlie's family. His mom, dad, Tori, his sister, and a younger brother named Oliver. And as Nick keeps coming over, Tori points out that she doesn't think that Nick is straight, which feels fair because Nick, from her point of view, she can see him blushing around Charlie, and they also hug a lot, and he says that he wishes their nights together didn't have to end. Not that Tori heard that last part, but after that, Nick starts to panic a little. He feels like there's something wrong with him, so he starts Googling questions about his sexuality. And what he realizes is that he does like girls, but maybe he also likes one specific boy. And by April, Charlie finally admits to Tal that he thinks Nick might not be straight and Nick might actually like him back. And he has a lot of reasons for his line of thought. And honestly, the reasons are pretty solid. But Nick's friends are also starting to notice that something's going on between him and Charlie, and thankfully Coach Singh steps in and reminds them to be polite and not to speculate, which I appreciated because why are you gonna be speculating about your bestie's sexuality out loud? Then Nick invites Charlie to Harry Green's 16th birthday party so he won't have to be alone with his usual friend group, and Charlie agrees. And at that party, Harry drags Nick away from Charlie while they were talking to go talk to a girl that he used to have a crush on and kissed years before. And that conversation makes Nick lose track of Charlie, and when he asks his friends if they saw where Charlie went, the group and especially Harry starts questioning why Nick even hangs out with him. And Nick finally says what was on his mind this whole time, that he thinks that Harry is a dick. After Charlie left from Nick, we find out that he ran into Ben and finally got his point across about how he was feeling. He was able to tell Ben that he doesn't want to talk to him and that Ben should never touch him again. Nick ends up finding Charlie and he's able to tell him everything that went down, and Nick went and grabbed his hand and told him that he was proud of him, and they continue to hold hands at the party and go somewhere quieter. They end up sitting alone in a room together. Nick admits that he has a crush on someone and Charlie assumes that it's a girl, and Nick tells him he shouldn't assume that, so Charlie asks if Nick would date someone who wasn't a girl, and Nick says maybe, and then Charlie says, would you kiss someone who wasn't a girl? And Nick then again says maybe, and Charlie asks if Nick would kiss him, and Nick says yes. I was speechless the first time that I got to read volume 1. Like, how are you going to end on that note? I'm not usually a fan of cliffhangers, but Alice Osman had me wanting to get to volume 2 immediately because I needed to know what happened at this party. Stay tuned for volume 2